The number of foreign visitors continues to slump. Travel research firm Tourism Economics is predicting now that the U.S. will see 8% fewer international travelers.
Fort Lauderdale tourism officials say they've seen a marked decline in the number of Canadians visiting the state since U.S. President Donald Trump began making 51st state comments.
Right now, Florida is facing one of the most shocking economic crises in its history. And surprisingly, it wasn't caused by a hurricane, a pandemic, or even a natural disaster. No, this crisis was self-inflicted. It was caused by politics, arrogance, and decisions that insulted the state's most loyal and valuable visitors. Decisions that, in just a matter of months, threatened to unravel decades of economic success. You might know Florida for its beaches, amusement parks, and year-round sunshine. Its identity is built on leisure, tourism, and the promise of a getaway unlike anywhere else in the world. But behind the palm trees and bright neon signs lies a story of money, trust, and loyalty. And more importantly, the breaking of it. Today, we dive deep into how Florida politicians drove away Canadian tourists, the snowbirds who spend tens of thousands of dollars each winter, and how this decision could cost the state billions of dollars, possibly threatening jobs and communities across the entire peninsula. Let's start with the numbers. Canadian tourists are not your typical vacationers. They don't just show up for a weekend getaway or a short summer trip. Many spend entire winters in Florida. They rent homes, buy groceries, dine in local restaurants, play golf, attend cultural events, and participate in community life. In other words, they don't just visit Florida, they become part of its economic ecosystem. On average, a Canadian household spends around $33,000 per season. That's money that supports hotels, local stores, restaurants, golf courses, and services across the state. But beyond money, they bring stability. They help businesses survive the slow winter months, keep seasonal workers employed, and maintain vibrant communities in areas that might otherwise quiet down. Now imagine what happens if these tourists suddenly stop coming. Towns like Fort Myers Beach, Clearwater, Sarasota, and Naples, places heavily dependent on winter tourism, would feel the impact immediately. Restaurants would see fewer reservations, grocery stores, fewer customers, and hotels would have empty rooms. Jobs would be affected, seasonal employees would lose hours, and the vibrancy of entire communities could vanish. Boarded-up shops and silent streets would replace the energy that defines Florida's winter months. And yet, despite knowing this, Florida politicians made a series of decisions that seemed almost designed to push Canadians away. The problem started at the top, with national political rhetoric that insulted Canadian leaders and, indirectly, the people themselves. Many Canadians, feeling disrespected and unwelcome, reconsidered their winter plans, and Florida, heavily dependent on these snowbirds, was hit hardest. According to Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Canadian visits to Florida dropped by 80% during this period. Local businesses reported mass cancellations. Richard Cleet, a hotel owner in Hollywood, Florida, said that many of his Canadian guests were boycotting the state entirely. His bookings were down by 50% compared to previous years. Families who returned year after year and had developed relationships with staff and local businesses suddenly stopped coming. But this was just the beginning. While Canadian tourists were already retreating, Florida's political leaders proposed a move that worsened the situation, eliminating all 62 tourist development councils, TDCs, in the state. For those unfamiliar, TDCs are essentially Florida's marketing arms for tourism. They collect hotel taxes and use the funds to attract visitors from around the world, maintain and restore beaches, host sports events and tournaments, promote local attractions and small businesses. These councils are critical. Removing them would be like a company firing its entire marketing department and then wondering why sales drop. It's economic self-sabotage. To put it in perspective, These councils collect nearly $2 billion annually. Cutting them out of the system would cost the Florida economy $37 billion and wipe out $22.5 billion in wages for local workers, all for the sake of a small property tax break, a minuscule saving for residents that comes at the cost of millions of livelihoods. Robert Scrow, executive director of Destinations Florida, called the move economic sabotage, warning that over 2 million Floridians would face job insecurity. And these aren't just executives or business owners, they are hotel staff, restaurant servers, small business employees, and families who depend on tourism revenue to pay bills and put food on the table. The problem gets worse when we consider the nature of tourism. Visitors are not interchangeable. A Canadian snowbird who rents a home for 3 months, shops at local stores, and develops relationships with the community cannot simply be replaced by a tourist from Brazil who comes for a 1-week vacation. Their spending patterns, loyalty, and community involvement are unique. Losing them is not just about numbers, it's about relationships, economic ecosystems, and the rhythm of local economies. Take communities like Fort Myers Beach or Clearwater. Boarded-up shops and empty streets are a visible reminder of the hemorrhaging tourism economy. Vacation rental operators, like Annie Holcomb in Panama City, stress that TDCs are essential for Florida to remain competitive. Tourism is a competitive business, she says. You can't stop marketing just because you're on top. She's right. Mexico, the Caribbean, and even other U.S. states are competing for the same visitors. Without Florida's marketing, the state loses not just revenue, but relevance. Even more frustrating is that Florida was thriving before these political moves. In 2024, the state welcomed 142.9 million visitors, a 1.6% increase from the previous year. Tourism generated over $150 billion in economic activity and supported 2.1 million jobs. The state was a powerhouse, but politicians chose short-term political gains over decades of hard-earned success. Canadian tourism, in particular, was in serious decline. By August 2025, visits from Canada had dropped 25.2% year over year. Many Canadians opted for destinations like Brazil, Europe, or simply stayed home. For local businesses, this was devastating. Carol Dover, president and CEO of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, highlighted that even the most skilled management could not overcome political decisions that alienated loyal customers. And here's the human side. These are not faceless numbers. They are families, retirees, small business patrons, and seasonal workers. The relationships they build over decades, favorite restaurants, local stores, social networks, cannot be rebuilt overnight. Every empty rental, every closed shop, every lost paycheck is a tangible reminder of the consequences of political mismanagement. Consider a retired couple from Ontario who for 15 years has spent winters in Sarasota. They have a circle of friends, a favorite golf course, and a routine involving local shops and restaurants. This year, they stayed home. Their absence isn't just a number, it's lost business for multiple local stores, fewer hours for employees, and less tax revenue for the city. So, what's the lesson? Tourism is not just an economic sector, it's an ecosystem. Every political decision ripples across communities, families, and livelihoods. Mismanagement, arrogance, or ignorance can turn a thriving economy into a struggling one. Florida's situation is a cautionary tale about underestimating your best customers, the importance of marketing, and the consequences of political hubris. As Florida moves into the critical winter tourism season, questions abound. Can Canadian tourists be won back? Can Florida recover billions in lost revenue? Will other international visitors still consider Florida a viable option? Only time will tell. But one thing is clear, political decisions have real, measurable consequences. When leaders neglect the very people who sustain the economy, everyone pays the price. Florida's natural advantages, beaches, attractions, and climate remain intact. But in tourism, perception is everything. Trust is built over decades and can be destroyed in months. Other sunny destinations are ready to capitalize on Florida's missteps. And the state faces a long road to recovery. The story is still unfolding, but it serves as a lesson not just for Florida, but for any economy that relies on loyal customers. Treat them with respect, nurture relationships, and never take them for granted. Once trust is broken, rebuilding it is an uphill battle, and the cost can reach billions of dollars.